Background: I met my wife when I was studying overseas when I was 27. She was 25 at the time with a 2-year-old daughter. She was, and to this day is, a damn good artist and a middle school art teacher. Her brother was my first friend overseas and still is one of my best friends, and I met my wife when he invited me for Christmas dinner with his family. I have no idea what she saw in a broke college student in his late 20s, but I thank my lucky stars she gave me a chance. 2 years later, we were married, and a year after that, at 30, we had our son, our second child. I adopted her daughter shortly after we were married, and I love her to death. She's always been a daddy's girl, and no matter what anyone says, she's mine, despite the fact that she's very white, and I'm as Asian as they come. I eventually graduated and landed a good job as a financial analyst in a pretty big company. I busted my butt off at work, and when I wasn't at work, I was busy trading in the stock market. After a couple of years, good investments, and a lot of loans, I took a leap of faith and quit my job to start my own company. When my daughter was 14 and my son was 9, I started making 7 figures a year from what I earned from the company and my several investments. I slowed down after that and cut my hours a bit, so I'd be more involved in my children's lives. Since my daughter was young, she's always shown interest in business. She'd spend her Saturdays with me in my company and wanted to learn all about it. I offered to take my son too, but he wasn't interested and wanted to be an artist like his mother. Now, I just want to clarify that I was very involved in both my children's lives. I make it a point to talk to both of them over dinner almost every night. One of my son's first portraits, which was of me and my wife, still hangs in my office at work. Because of this, I've always groomed my daughter to be my successor. She's the one who always took interest in running my company one day, and even studied in a prestigious business school. My son studied art in Italy. Now, I know every parent says this, but my daughter is a genius when it comes to business. She works, or at least worked, in a big international company based in Europe before coming home last year to work with me and mine, where she has plans to scale it to even greater heights. It's still not a very big company, and this is where the problem starts. My wife and I are about to retire, early, I know, to travel the world. She's never been into luxury items, unlike me, but she does love to travel. So we sat our children down and announced that we were retiring early and that they'd be getting some of their inheritance soon. I want to sort out my estate very early to avoid problems for them when I'm gone. The moment I said daughter will be taking my place in the company, my son was livid. He started accusing me of favoritism, being a useless dad, and his sister of manipulating me into giving it to her and leaving him with nothing. My wife tried to calm him down, but he stormed out, but not before yelling, "She's not even your real daughter anyway." I didn't know how to feel about that. It was a mix of pain, anger, regret, and a whole lot of other stuff. I was hurt by some of the things he said, angry about how he said his sister wasn't my daughter, and regret because somehow I feel like I failed him as a father. I wasn't even finished explaining how things would go. I hugged my daughter, who was crying, and reassured her that I loved her so much, while my wife tried to get a hold of our son. I tried to be a good father to him. I paid for his international education, attended all his art events, and even introduced him to some of my friends that were into art. I made sure to take him on father-son trips, 2 every couple of months. It never occurred to me that he was ever remotely jealous of his sister being my apprentice, despite the fact that I did try to take him with us when we went to work. Also, I never planned on giving one child more than the other. My daughter was only taking over running the company, but ownership would have been 55-45, so my son would still own part of the company. I own 3 condos in the city, 2 of which are occupied by my children, which they would keep, and the third would have went to my son to make up for giving his sister more equity in the company. He would have also kept my watch collection, which I promised to him at a young age. Both kids would have got a substantial amount of money too. My current home would still be mine to rent out, and I'm keeping my stocks, so I'd still have some money coming in to fund our travels. Now, I don't know how to go on from here. I'm set to retire after this virus is sorted, and it's safe to travel. It's been a week, and my son still won't answer his mother's call. I'm still mad about how he acted, but I still want him to be part of our lives. My daughter even offered to give him everything if it would make him happy, but I shut that down immediately. I worked hard for both my children. How do I proceed? Part of me wants to call, but I know we'd just get into another screaming match, because the thing he said still hurts me. That's if he even answers my call. I don't think I did anything wrong here, but if I did, please tell me so I can fix it. My wife is beside me right now, and she's still trying to reach our son, but no luck. Any advice would be helpful. Edit. I don't think this part was clear. My son never heard how I was going to split my assets and ownership of the company. He only heard the part where I said my daughter was taking my place before he went ballistic. Edit 2. My son doesn't fully rely on my money. He lives in my condo and I paid for his car, but he makes his own money and his work sells. He's very passionate about art and is very good at it. Personally, I don't think you did anything wrong. It sounds like you were very thoughtful in your succession plan, and it sounds very fair. If anything, it sounds somewhat skewed towards your son, as your daughter would be putting all the work into the business, and he would simply profit from her work. I think your son is behaving quite spoiled. In your shoes, I would just send him a note to let him know that you weren't done explaining how things would be split, and to let you know when he's ready to talk about it. You don't actually owe either of your children any inheritance. Any penny you give them is very generous and kind, but your money is yours to spend as you wish. I think he is behaving in quite the entitled way, and in my opinion, I don't think you should play into it. You're intending to give him 45% of the company, even though he won't have the experience running it? This seems like a recipe for disaster to me. If he wants to get involved, give him a chance to show how. If he doesn't, you're still giving him an inheritance. It's not that he's being kicked out of the family. Logically, I'm sure he can see this. There's an emotional element here which you're not going to be able to remedy by giving him control of your company. I would urge you to work on this aspect of your relationship. Consider family therapy. He doesn't feel connected to you. He's an adult now, and that's also his responsibility to work on. I'm sure in the next few years he will start to see this. For what it's worth, I'm in a similar position with my family's business. It was a disaster for me to work with my father, and I ended up selling my share and pulling out. Our relationship is better now, but I also feel passed over in a sense now that my sibling is the one still involved. In fact, a lot of our father-child relationship used to be based on discussing business together. We both respect that side of each other. Now that we don't work together anymore, it felt like a loss to me, like we didn't have anything to connect over. So I can understand that your son might feel left out. I've had to come to terms with our relationship and understand that my father has his faults that he won't necessarily ever grow past. It's up to me to accept them. I can see where your son is coming from. My advice to you would be to work on connecting with him emotionally. I believe therapy could help a lot with that. It sounds like you're working very hard to make things fair, but money and estates make people go crazy. It sounds like he has some long simmering resentment towards his sister. He may not have any real reason behind it, but it's there. My brother is the same way, even though he was given more than me when we were growing up, and continued to be supported by my parents into his 30s. I'm not sure you can do much except give him time to pull his head out of his butt. I have a feeling his response is deeply rooted in S attitudes towards women and a sense of entitlement. Also, 55-45 split means a little unfair to your daughter. She's going to be the one running and responsible for the business, but only 10% more equity? I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of profit sharing, so he gets to profit from the business at pretty close to the same amount without putting in any work. I don't know, that seems a little unfair to me. I've been with my fiancée for 3 years, 8 months engaged. We've had our ups and downs, but for the most part, things have been pretty great, until she moved in 6 months ago. We've been combining our lifestyles and finances, basically easing into managing our lives together. The problem is, she's a people pleaser, in her own words. She's been in therapy for 6 years, and I guess I never knew how bad it was until moving in with her, a lot of which she's hidden from me. I don't want this to get too long, so here's some of the highlights in no particular order. She recently was promoted into accounts payable at her company, and realized she is the lowest paid person on payroll. She didn't negotiate a good starting wage and has never asked for a raise or had one, despite multiple promotions. She inherited a car a few months ago and sold it. She had offers online from $18,000 to $25,000, but sold it to the first person who showed up for $10,000. She caught someone stealing her bike at college. The woman stealing the bike managed to convince my wife that it wasn't actually her bike, and my fiancé just let her take it, despite the fact that she caught the woman cutting her bike lock. Last spring was my 30th birthday, and she ordered a giant chocolate cake for the party. The cake normally comes with nuts, but given my allergies for nuts, she ordered it without them. Well, when she went to pick it up and it had nuts on it, she just paid for it and brought it home. I couldn't even be in the same room as the cake. Which brings us to tomorrow. My father recently passed away, and I need to fly to the other end of the country to get things sorted out with family, attend the funeral, etc. Meanwhile, we recently had a pipe burst in our home, and the contractors will be out tomorrow to fix it. My flight's at 6 a.m., and my fiancé will have to handle it, including all the negotiations because we don't know the extent of the damages. I've been giving it a lot of thought, and I just can't trust my fiancé to handle it. And if I can't trust or rely on her to do something like this, how can we really be life partners? I mean, I trust that she is always looking out for me and has my best interest at heart, but I can't trust her to get things done. We've talked about it a few times before, but it's been unproductive. She's convinced she's just being nice and doesn't like confrontation, then brings up examples of extremely confrontational people. I think she puts her aversion to conflict above her and our long-term goals, and she needs to find a happy medium. She doesn't understand how negatively this is impacting her life. But at the same time, we've had some amazing years together, and she really is a great person. We're compatible in almost every other way. So is this over like I think it is? Is there any way I can get through to her? Should I tell her I'm thinking about leaving? Honey, you call it people-pleasing, but I'm telling you as gently as possible that it's gotten to the degree that it's interfering with our ability to function normally. And it's impacting our relationship because I can't rely on you to take the necessary action to protect us in the event of a conflict. We need to go to counseling to resolve this before we proceed with marriage. I would postpone the wedding if it is scheduled and have a come-to-Jesus talk with her. Make it clear that her passivity is a deal-breaker for you and that you need her to communicate the extent of it to her therapist and come up with an actionable plan for addressing it. A plan that might involve working with a different therapist, as after 6 years, she's made no progress with this one on this topic. Then be prepared to leave if she doesn't, because her willingness to be walked all over results in you getting walked on too, and that's no way to live. People-pleasing is like doing favors for people when you don't want to, and they don't deserve it. Letting people steal your bike? That's just being afraid to deal with life. Children wouldn't lie down and accept that. Not researching a car's value and asking for it? That's just being spineless. I, 43 female, and my husband, 47 male, have been married for 4 years now. We both have children from previous marriages, 12 male and 10 male, and 18 female. My husband and I dated for 3 years prior to getting married, but moved in altogether 2 years ago. Lives with us full-time, and it had a bit of a rocky start with mine and O's relationship, but we managed to push through it. I told from day one that I wasn't her mom, but if there was anything she wants to talk about or need, she can come to me. After a few months, we became quite close, and she talked to me about anything she was too embarrassed to talk about with her dad. Recently, has been trying to make friends at college since she just started in the spring. On-campus residence is very expensive for the college, and it's close to our house, so decided to stay at home. That's not a problem. The problem is that keeps bringing her friends over to hang out, but leaving it a mess. Normally, it's not a major deal. I have OCD, so sometimes there is issues depending on the situation though, because she picks up after herself. But recently I hired a housekeeper to clean the house once a week since I've been working overtime more often, and me and my husband just don't have time. It is expensive, but I cannot stand it when it becomes too messy for me, so I think it's worth it. This time she brought her friends over after the house was cleaned, and I guess they decided not to take their shoes off and walked all around the house leaving footprints. They also made pizza from scratch and left the crumbs on the counters, among other things. That pretty much made the entire house filthy before I could even come home. Once again, the cleaning service is quite expensive because I like a higher level of cleaning quality, so I was pissed. My husband is trying to make me let it go because was always struggling making friends, but I can't let it go because of how much it cost. I requested the exact amount I paid for the cleaning service to her Venmo, and she acted all confused on why she had to pay for it. I explained that her and her friends ruined my house that was just cleaned, but she insisted it wasn't her. I have a Ring camera, and I have video proof of her and her friends going into the house, and they were the only ones home that day before me. I gave her 2 choices: pay for the damages, or I stop paying for her phone. She's complained, saying it wasn't her, and she doesn't have the money to pay the phone bill. Am I the a-hole? Edit to clear confusion. The cleaners came before fully cleaned the house, then left, and an hour later came in with her friends. Footprints in your house and pizza crumbs do not make a house filthy. You had plenty of options other than charging your stepdaughter. You could have cleaned it. Your husband could have. You could have asked her to clean it, etc. You're the a-hole. Telling your stepdaughter she ruined your house is a surefire way to ruin your relationship with her. You're the a-hole for calling your house ruined for a fairly easily cleanable mess. She should have cleaned it, because you're not the one who usually disciplines, and this is obviously an issue for you, and between the two of you, you should have told her father to enforce that. Of course, her friends should have taken their shoes off. Of course, your stepdaughter needs to clean up after herself, and her friends. But she's not an a-hole for living and sometimes leaving a mess. Ruined implies actual damage. A mess is a mess, not damage. You're overreacting. You're the a-hole. This is an absurd overreaction. She left some crumbs and had shoes on. Tell her to mop the floors and clear up the crumbs. OCD is not an excuse to act like a jerk when a teenager behaves like a totally normal teenager.